Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast. Today we're wrapping up a big week of talking about injury rehabilitation with our resident physio, Phil White. And today we're talking about why rest isn't best and motion is lotion. This is a really amazing concept and it will change your training.
Morning everybody, welcome to the stream. If this is your first show joining us, my name is Yanni. Across the table from me, I got my brother Rad Bormeister.
We do live pretty much across the road from each other.
To my left, that's right, to my left I've got our resident physiotherapist, Phil White from ADPT Physio, one of them, that's right. And behind the mixer, behind the camera, we have the voice of God, Richard Lellies, the sexiest man on the planet. We are Unity Gym and the Unified Movement System. We take driven people and turn them into athletes, and we do that by cultivating a performance mindset. We do that by teaching people to understand pain science. We do that by understanding the difference between macro and micro loading and load management principles, and how to avoid creating an injury identity for yourself. We are going to bring this series in for a landing today by talking about one of the most important aspects of injury rehabilitation, which is that motion is lotion. And we don't actually often recommend rest, and I'm going to let Phil explain why that is. There are, of course, certain circumstances where we would say rest is best, but it's usually very rare. And we'll teach you why. We're also going to teach you a lot about when pain is useful for you and when it's not. We're going to teach you a little bit about the healing processes on a biological and physiological sense. We're going to talk about how to turn the pain signal down using certain types of exercise methods. And we're also going to really dive deep into the psychological effect of having an injury. But first of all, I want to ask you the question of the day. What have you learnt this week? What key insight or takeaway have you learned or gained from this week's series on injury rehab? Throw it in the comments and let us know that you're listening. And also smash that like button if you're watching on YouTube. It does help our channel a lot. It helps get these videos out in front of more people so we can educate and have a positive impact on the world. And give us a 5-star review if you're listening on the podcast. Phil and Richard put a lot of effort into that podcast. Show them how much you care.
Yeah, Richie has taken that one over on you, Rich.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for anyone who has listened, obviously this week is kind of my special week on the podcast series, and I really try and refine sort of these concepts and teach them in a way that is understandable. But I would just love some feedback, so do send an email through to phil@adpt.physio, so no.com.physio, and tell me what you think, because and tell me what you'd like to learn or what you got out of it, or things that you think I should find a better analogy for or something like that, because I am trying to make this as useful as possible, and hopefully save you some pain and save you some money of seeing health practitioners and getting nowhere. So
absolutely. And just know this, that we have we're writing a book, and any feedback you give us may end up going into the book. So you could be etched in. No. Yeah, that's right. You could be etched in history there. Now, quick announcement before we get started and before I get Rad to tell us how he's going today. Next week, we're moving the podcast to 11:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is going to be somewhat in the
7:30 p.m. New York time and 4:30 p.m. LA time.
LA time, which is going to be a very different time for a lot of you around the world. So just be aware of that. If you are used to tuning in live, it's going to be a lunch and learn here in Australia, and it's going to be an evening and learn over in the States, and middle of the night, I think 1 a.m. or something in the UK. So enjoy. It's a
for everyone, I've looked at the analytics from where people listen to on the podcast, and it is truly all around the world. So this, it's
that's exactly
exciting
right.
to see all the other countries, and we don't just think about.
Unfortunately, London, it will be 12:30 p.m.
12:30 p.m.
AM.
Yeah.
12:30 a.m.
AM. Okay.
After Big Night Out, you want a few nuggets of
jump
knowledge?
on and learn. Yeah. That's right.
Or if you're on the late shift.
Over a kebab.
That's right. Absolutely.
Or if you're on the late shift.
Yeah.
All right, let's get stuck in,
Yeah, let's get stuck in. So first and foremost, let's just talk a little bit about the healing processes and why. Let's start on when pain is useful. Because we did talk about this, and a lot of this today, guys, we were having in this discussion offline, is going to be a little bit of a recap of stuff we've spoken about this week, but that's okay. And I was actually going to throw this over to Rad to say, but I'll say it anyway. This show is sponsored by today's flash sale launch, which is all of our rehab programs. Now, we sell our rehab programs as a standalone product for most people who don't do our online coaching. Sometimes we do plug them into our coaching program and our model, but most of the time they're best used for people who aren't doing our program. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well, because it's quite important that you guys understand.
Or if your injury is in the very early stages of recovery for a very bad injury, because this is the exact, like the knee rehab program and the shoulder rehab program were pretty much created after I used them to rehabilitate my knee and my shoulder, and then you and I sat down and with Phil's advice said, let's turn this into a program that somebody else can use. So it is for people that are in that program as well, but that's when your injury is, at a very early stage and something that needs very specific training to deal with.
Yeah. Well, if you go like that, the forearm and elbow program is for what we all use to overcome golfers and tennis elbow. Exactly. The anterior pelvic tilt program is the program you use to help improve your posture, and the lower back and hip program is what we've all used to overcome lower back pain. And
they've all been created because we've used them,
and then we've deployed them on our tribe, and they worked amazingly well too. So anyway, today's show is sponsored by the rehab programs. They're going to go live in an email from me in a sec, and Rad's going to punch it up onto the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group.
Again, we've been so fortunate to have the online program sponsor our show.
Yes.
The guys over there running that are just so generous, and we're really grateful to have a connection with them.
That's right. And guys, if you're listening on the podcast or if you're watching on YouTube, it really is best that you access these over from the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group or our email list. You need to subscribe, otherwise you miss out on this, because when we put the link up, you may end up watching or listening to the show after the sale is finished, and it just doesn't mean much for you. So we will put it up in the description, but yeah, if you get there too late, sorry. It's only 72 hours. All right, Phil. Let's.
Well, I think the first place to start is why emotion is emotion. Like, we're not just saying that because it sounds cute and it rhymes. Like, it's not just this sort of little handy catchphrase that means nothing. What it is like, I'm constantly talking about how important words are for our context and understanding of the world, and I think that so much of medical, like the westernized medicine, is basically like relying on things like lotions, relying on things like medications, and having these external factors that are we put on ourselves, or we ingest, or we have things done to ourselves to get better. And what we're really trying to flip the script here with Motion is Lotion, we didn't come up with it. It's a thing that's is said all by other people as well. But like, Motion is Lotion is basically saying, like, no, you don't need all these other things. You don't need someone to give you some funky pill or stick needles in you or whatever. Like, the thing that the body needs the most is movement and correct loading.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, really important to get out of the way first, is that it's like it's all about your own brain understanding about how this shit works.
I've heard a really interesting analogy that's a funny way to look at it, but when you move, when your muscles move, when your body moves, it stimulates obviously blood flow and blood circulation, and that in itself is a part of the healing process. But if you got your arm and put it in a plaster cast and completely immobilized it, so it couldn't move at all, the arm atrophies. That's the first stages. And whether or not this is true, because I'm sure there hasn't been many clinical studies on this, but I've heard people say that if you leave that for long enough, it'll necrophile, which means it'll die and need to be amputated. And it's an interesting thought, if a limb, just atrophied eventually until it got to a point where the circulation wasn't great enough that it just died. So it's a funny way to look at the extreme.
I guess that's like less about circulation probably and more about like neurological stimulus.
Well, all of it. I mean, the whole lot,
So,
yeah.
Look, I watched it firsthand. Anyone who's had a really severe injury and has had to have surgical intervention, you're mobilized for the first week, basically. It is catastrophic how quickly your muscle disappears. It wastes away. Like, within 5 days, there was a visual difference. Like, the atrophy in my quadriceps was ridiculous.
My foot was in a cast for 6 weeks, and when it came out, my calf was the size of my forearm on one side. I was so scared. I was so afraid that it was never going to come back.
Yeah, and I was warned. I was warned by Tony Battaji, friends of mine who know a lot about this, the surgeons. Just you've got to, because it's very painful when you first come out post-operation and your brain is screaming at you. And we'll get to this why when pain is useful and when it's not. It's very, very uncomfortable, but they're like, you have to do these exercises. Otherwise, it is going to waste away. And the start of the exercise is literally sitting on the floor and trying to contract the muscle, and you can't. Like they've taken a knife to it, and it's your body's just going, and it's really hard. It just feels like jelly, and you're trying to contract it, and that's the first step. And then you start to get up and load it. But it's just really interesting because your brain is saying no, don't do it. It hurts, and your surgeon and your doctors are saying you've got to do it. And within 5 days, there's just no muscle there. It's just insane. So why don't we talk about when pain is useful and when it's not off the back of that?
So if you haven't listened to Monday's episode about pain science, I definitely would recommend going back and checking that one out. We have a little visitor in our podcast. Hello, Kobe.
My son just came through to plug his iPad in to get it charged. We could have waited outside with that, buddy. That's okay. All
right. So basically, if you haven't listened to Monday, definitely would recommend. But the big things to sort of think about is pain is very, very useful in an acute setting where you have, a something mechanical or something, traumatic sort of happening that you get an obvious injury and you have like an obvious mechanism of injury, I think is the key thing to think about there. It's like there's a reason why like something has happened, and that acute pain is very useful to basically, it's your brain's perceived threat and it's telling you like, if we keep loading this, then that could be problematic. So basically that's a really useful time for pain. But then we think about tissue healing times, and for muscle, tendons, bones, ligaments, cartilage, and nerves, they all have slightly different healing times, and basically you can look that up. We won't bother going into all that now, but once that time has sort of elapsed and you've been getting back to normal activity, if you still have lingering pain there, then that's when pain is generally going to be less useful. And that's where we sort of think with chronic and persistent pain, often it's an oversensitization issue rather than it's no longer telling you about tissue damage. So if you want to know more about the sensitization, definitely again go back to Monday and listen to that.
Now I want to jump in and just make a very important point that we haven't really discussed a lot during this series, which is like we talk a lot and we almost even joke a lot about how our biggest goal is for you to never have to see a physio and get educated, and I even wrote about that yesterday in the email. But understanding when pain is useful and when it's not useful is one part in the journey where I really think it is important that you get a little bit of help with that.
I was going to get to that.
Yeah. you go.
So basically, the next kind of thing I was going to talk about was with tendinopathy, where you basically, if you know you have a tendinopathy, which we've talked about at length on other episodes as well, there's important times there to train through that pain at a certain level, and then using sort of 24-hour pain as feedback time. But hopefully you can kind of see that like a lot of this sort of stuff around tissue healing times, specific diagnosis, like if you don't know, then that can be quite baffling. So I just do really encourage people, like if you are feeling pain, like especially if you're sort of feeling like, intense pain that you don't understand why it's there or where it came from, if you're feeling pain that wakes you up at night, like it is really important to get diagnosis. And do remember that this is not a physio consultation listening to a podcast. Like you do need to get that sussed out, but then hopefully you have enough knowledge then with your health practitioner that you see that you can ask the right questions and sort of kind of get a bit of a feeling if they're trying to either pull you down the rabbit hole of endless treatments, or if they have your best interest in heart and they're they're pacing your way out of an injury and back into movement. So
like Rad and I and Richard are very, very lucky that that we have a circle of influence around us. People like Phil, people like Nilesh, like Tom Cartwright down the road, like Tony Battaji. All of these people play a role. Aaron McKenzie even. Rad's working with Roy Gold at the moment. These people have a big influence on us, and we can bounce questions off them and things like that. And we got to accept that the broader community don't have such an amazing circle of influence that they can rely on to help guide us. So, I do urge you guys to build a circle of influence, and of course we are probably a big part of that. And I know I get emails daily from people saying you have no idea the effect you guys are having around the world, and that's fantastic. But there are many occasions where we would do the wrong thing probably, if we didn't have someone say, hey, I'd probably do it like this. A perfect example is, me going off on a run 6 months ago when I just wasn't really ready for it and couldn't walk for a week afterwards because my knee blew up. We make mistakes all the time, and we're lucky and fortunate that we've got great people around us to sort of help us.
Look, all of the people that you just listed have been a huge factor, but you have to pay the biggest amount of credit to Phil, because honestly, without, over the last however long it's been since you've been at the gym now full time, what I've gotten from just being able to have conversations that you would normally have to go and have a consultation for has been invaluable. Because before that, at best, maybe I would have seen Tom once a week or Phil once a week. And so that's been such a pivotal part in us as personal trainers, coaches, getting to the level where we are now with our ability to talk. I mean, you have to remember the shows that we were doing a year ago, often the majority of the show was us asking questions but getting coached by Phil on how to do this stuff and how to deal with injuries. And we've obviously gotten to a point now where we're having better conversations about that now. But yeah, so it is. It's been invaluable. It's been an amazing thing. So if you're listening to the show now, you're benefiting from that, from having Phil here, but also from us being able to ask those better questions and have those better conversations. So I think that's just can't be understated.
Yeah, absolutely. And all you guys
and
out
it is
there.
that asking better questions is what I'm really hoping that you guys get away. I don't want people to think that suddenly they have all the knowledge of physio and they don't need professional advice and they know better than a professional. But being able to ask good questions gives you power in that relationship that is often a less than ideal power dynamic for the patient.
Because it also helps you to figure out if the person that you're going to put your trust and faith in is somebody that's worth you dishing out your hard-earned on. You can go and you can ask those good questions. And you and I have been able to do that with doctors, with GPs, for a decade now, and it's probably because of Tony Battaji that we've been able to ask those better questions, where you go to a GP and they give you some advice and you ask them a few questions and there's certain answers that you'll get from people that just bring up the red flags, where you and I will walk out of a doctor's consult and go, that guy is an idiot. Yeah. His advice is 20 years old.
Well, not so much an idiot, but they just...
Well, people specialise on totally different things. They have different interests. And, I had a patient come in the other day who had headaches and dizziness related to calisthenics. And headaches and dizziness is a very specific field of physiotherapy that some people devote their whole career to. And that's not something that I've done extra training in, or not something that I've had a deep dive in. I'm more in the musculoskeletal sort of realm. So I was very happy to refer out to another physio that's their specialty. So it's all about, when you see a health practitioner, it's, if they don't know much about your specific condition, it may not be that they're a terrible person and they're a terrible practitioner. It's just everyone does have their own special sort of niches and
exactly.
Like that,
and a lot of the time they're just the system is, I think, set up to fail because they're just overworked. They're churning people through, and they're very much they don't really have the time. It's very rare that you get a doctor who's able to sit down and really analyse what's going on for you and explain it properly. They just don't have the energy all the time or the scope to
Which
do
is
that.
sad, because we can even bring this back into the topic of the day, because it's sad because it's maybe not even that the system's failing people, it's maybe that the system is so overworked in a way where it doesn't need to be. If people could learn this concept of motion is lotion and understand that so much of the healing process comes from actually the doing rather than the just going seeking,
It's interesting you say that, because we actually have one of the best systems in the world, and it was announced this morning that Sydney, Australia, was voted the second healthiest city in the world by capita, and the way they judge that is by the amount of people who exercise and the amount of disease, injuries and illness is reported, and we lost to one European city. I'm not sure which city it was. I can't remember, but
recount.
But yeah, that's right.
Recount.
But what came out of that for me was that the majority of people in Sydney exercise, and they exercise daily.
Well, maybe not do you reckon the majority, or just the highest number in the world?
There's a lot of people.
Do you reckon the majority?
Maybe
I don't think majority.
Probably not the majority.
Probably
not the majority, but the highest number per capita in the world.
There's definitely a culture here for around it.
Big time. Yeah. We value not exercise in gyms. They didn't interview one person in a gym. It was people outdoors training. And stuff like that. And I do that every morning. I go for a run, and I run often around to Mrs. Macquarie's chair, which is in in part of the city. Beautiful. You go past a bunch of parks, and there's always people doing little workouts, sit-ups on the ground, burpees, things like that, just getting a sweat on.
I had a conversation with a dude setting up his gymnastics rings for his calisthenics workout down under the Harbour Bridge a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
and
right.
I asked him where he was learning and what he does, and he basically follows Daniel. He follows Fitness FAQ.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
cool.
look, it's great. It's culture. But look, this is the thing. Motion is lotion. And the reason why Sydney won that is because of the amount of people who are out there getting it done, exercising, moving every day. And, if we can bring this into sort of be really useful for the listener, the psychological effect of getting an injury is quite serious. It's quite severe, and it happens to me all the time. I get injured, and the first thing I want to do is just throw my arms up in the air and take my bat and ball and go home and sit at home and wallow in my sorrow, because now my pattern is interrupted. It's a massive pattern interrupt, an injury, and you got momentum and you're making progress, and then boom, something happens and you have to change it. You have to change what you were doing, because you can no longer do the program you were doing exactly the same or whatever else. And most people at that point make huge changes, which is not always necessary. Often it's just a matter of scaling back the intensity of the workout to suit the damaged tissue, so that you can continue moving forward, continue that motion, and it usually turns out to work itself out over time. But and this is why we don't often recommend people that are doing our program stop doing our program if they have an injury and start doing one of our rehab programs. Often, 9 times out of 10, the Foundations program will fix all of the issues, because it's just keeping the whole body moving. And it's also this a really important pain signal and metabolic state concept that we were talking about offline, which I really want to finish on going deep into, which is the concept of just the nature of exercising is having a really, really positive impact on your brain, which has a tendency to turn the signal down.
Yeah, so both your metabolic state and your signal. And just before we do jump into that, again, because I'm a word nerd, basically with motion, I don't want people to think that just motion is going to make things better. So
just
if you have an elbow,
in the car, as long as you're sitting in the car and you're moving,
the shake rate's not going to get you there.
And I don't want people to think that because motion is often kind of people might think spinal waves is good motion, and I love spinal waves, and I think it's a really useful tool for spinal pain. But I don't want people to think that motion is necessarily unloaded. Yeah. So when we're talking about motion here, it is about more of a catch-all term for exercise, basically.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really key to understand that point of what Yanni was saying there, how we we basically never tell people to hey, stay away from the gym for a couple of weeks. Well, we never do that unless they're in surgery or something. So what we do is just regress certain aspects of the training and maybe even progress others. So if you have a knee injury, hey, time to double down on your bench press. We're trying to keep people in that exercise habit, because it has such positive effects on the rest of your sort of pain experience and your metabolic sort of experience. So just on the regressions, I think that Unity, the program that we have here, is just so wonderful, because it is based around fundamental movement patterns, and for every squat, if you're having trouble with a high bar Aster grass squat, then there's ways that you can change certain parameters around that people can continue squatting. So you might be looking at limiting a bit of range, but you can still keep your intensity high. Whereas for other injuries, you maybe can it's more of an intensity issue, so maybe take a bit of weight off the bar, but you can still keep the range. So there's all these little parameters that you can change, and that's why we're working with someone who really can understand what those parameters that need changing are. But the great thing there is you can still turn up to the gym on a Tuesday and squat. So that's has a really positive effect on then that sort of metabolic signaling and also brain signaling that we talked about on Monday with the pain science. So basically, and I think we instead of recapping kind of what I talked about on Monday, I would recommend you just go back to Monday and probably listen to that. But what I think is really key here is that there's kind of a lot of research into exercise versus other interventions, so manual therapy, taping, surgery, injections, and whatever, and often the effect size of physio intervention, so even doing exercise, is kind of frustratingly small. You kind of want to feel hey, you've just gone you've got someone from 10 out of 10 pain to 0 out of 10 pain, and often it's more of you get someone from a 7 down to about a 5 or something like that in a certain amount of time, in the research that is, and that often matches up with other interventions, because usually time is the biggest factor for a lot of injuries. But the kind of point I want to make here is that if one group of people did exercise for 6 weeks intensely, or just modified their exercise, kept doing it for another 6 weeks, whereas you had another group who's maybe going in getting like spinal adjustments for 6 weeks, then the person who's done exercise and another group has gone and got had rest and medications for that 6 weeks, and the group that's had like rest and medications have probably put on a bit of weight and are in a poor metabolic state, have stopped doing all the things they loved. The person who's getting spinal adjustments has just spent about $160 a week, and probably stopped what they were doing. Whereas the person who's done exercise has got fitter, stronger. They've stayed in their community. They've engaged in, things that have a positive, known to have a positive mental effect, which will then feed back into a positive pain experience. They can be progressing in goals in other parts of their body. So if you look at the research and saying exercise is not necessarily like that much better than anything else, but think about all the side effects of exercise plus the positive effects, then it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, we've built a pretty solid case here to understand that when you hurt yourself, you should not stop exercising. I think that I hope that we've beat that drum hard enough. And we've talked this week about how pain is a symptom of the brain, and there is you can
not a symptom of the brain, an experience of the brain.
An experience of the brain. Sorry, and you can influence that pain signal. And really the best way to do it is through exercise, through reiterating to your brain that it is okay, your body is okay, and unless there's some really serious injury there, like a bone fracture or something like that, where it really needs to set and heal for a while, where motion is not certainly going to be lotion for that in that case. The best thing you can possibly do is keep your body exercising, keep your body training. A great example of this is a couple of weeks ago, I was doing an exercise and I triggered a really quite severe spasm in my back, and it was something that stuck with me all weekend. It was a Friday. I was deadlifting, and I don't know, it wasn't during the deadlift that I did it. It was during something else that the spasm happened. It was really ridiculous. Like I was picking something up, or I was doing something funny. I was cleaning up or something. I can't remember exactly, but it caused quite a debilitating spasm in my back that was very uncomfortable all weekend. And, the old me 10 years ago would have gone to see a physio or a doctor and freaked out and taken muscle relaxants and all this sort of stuff. But with my education now, you know what I did? I came in on Monday and I deadlifted it out. And this is really true. There's a true story. I, of course, regressed, and I only deadlifted on the day that I was doing it. I was deadlifting about 180 kilos. That's right. We were doing the supersets program, and I just overcooked it. And then I came back and I worked up to 140 kilos, really focused on form and technique. And within the second set of my 140 kilos, the spasm went away completely and never came back. And it was what I was doing there was I was just confirming to my brain that this is okay. My back is okay. I'm strong. I'm robust. I may have done something that just it wasn't happy with on the day, or I overcooked it a little bit. And that's an example. Now I can do that because of my experience level, and I know.
And also, we have the benefit of when Yanni hurt himself, and we can just chat about it a bit, cover sort of some red flags sort of things for spinal pain, and then just move on, and you can get on with your training. So I use deadlifts as one of the main sort of rehab strategies for back pain, but just for medical advice for anyone who's out there who starts experiencing back pain, don't necessarily just see this as a
but even still, if you think about how different that is from what the punter that comes into the gym with a back injury, so many people come in, like what we spoke about yesterday, and say, I hurt my back doing deadlifts, I can't do deadlifts. And here's a physio saying deadlifts are like my go-to exercise for back rehabilitation. So it is a really interesting thing to take away from this show about this idea of motion is lotion. It's before we were having these conversations all the time, Yanni and I were still in the mentality of, injured myself, need to just take a week or two off training and rest and recover. Yeah. And we completely don't do that anymore. Yanni just told you a story of how I've got plenty of stories of how I've, retrained my habits around that as well. And man, does it work. But you do need
You need the
the
guidance
correct
of a
strategy,
professional.
you need the right strategy,
Yeah.
or our rehab programs.
Yeah, 100%. Slip it in there. Look, guys, we're going to bring this in for a landing because we've got to prepare for our UMS online coaching, weekly group coaching call.
This is the last time you're going to hear this show at this time of day. Next week, 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australia time.
Yep.
Check it out in wherever you are in the world to listen. And if you can't catch it live, of course, you can watch the replay in the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group, or listen to the replay on Spotify or wherever you like to listen to your podcasts, or watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. And next week we start phase 3 of our podcast series. Our topics. Oh God, I got lost there. Yeah, we're going to be talking about how to become a better athlete in week 1. Week 2 is how to design better programs, and week 3 is to become strong, flexible, and athletic. And we're going to go really deep into just revealing exactly why our program is so successful. So it's going to be an exciting month. The rest of February. Buckle up, strap yourself in, whatever you need to do to get ready. And we're going to be going live at 11:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time.
And just one last quick reminder for anyone who has caught this week. I do really mean it when I say I'd love feedback about what you found helpful, what you were still confused by. Please do send me an email at phil@adbt.physio. That's .physio, not .com. And yeah, give me some thoughts if you want to anonymize it. Make a burner email or whatever, lay in. I do really want to just, hone this communication around this sort of stuff because it is so important. So
awesome, guys.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a fantastic
See you next
day.
week.
See you next week.
See ya.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.